So our agenda here for this particular webinar, it is to understand how you would come to a shortlist. I mean, how you would shortlist the universities to apply to. And also, I mean, basically, as part of that, what kind of profile would you require to apply to the universities that you shortlisted? Understanding, a thorough understanding of your profile. And documentation is a very important part of the application also. This is kind of, wherever you apply, documentation is a must, and you should be aware of the kind of documentation required, and your profile is also kind of related to the documentation. So naturally, we'll include a bit of the documentation also. So moving on, where to begin with? So naturally, this is such a confusing, question that we have. So there are so many factors, right? So there are people who advise you on this. There are people, there are other external factors also. Like sometimes you look up on the net. Sometimes there are forums that advise you various things. So basically, there are so many factors that we need to consider while looking at a shortlist. Now, let's look at what are the factors that we don't consider, but we oftentimes encounter, right? So one such factor, would be something like peers, peers advising us, right? Family suggestions. So there are oftentimes, there's family living abroad. So naturally, they give you a lot of advice on what is good for you. Now, just remember one thing, whenever it's a peer or family or, a senior advising you, they mean well for you, but they are advising you from the point of view of from their own perspectives. Like they have probably seen their own profile, a few of their own friends' profile or other family members' profile, and they have the best interest for you in mind. Now, so does everyone else, of course, but this is a perspective that's very limited to their own surroundings. So naturally, the advice that comes to you may not be applicable to you. So please do not go by that kind of advice only. Fine, it's good to take advice, keep it in consideration, but do not base your shortlist on that. Then, seniors. Many students, I've met many students who said that, my seniors have gone here, so they are from the same college and they have similar grades and similar GRE or GMAT scores. So they have gotten into this college. But there are so many factors that are taken into consideration that just focusing on a few such things often misleads you, and that, lands you nowhere. So it's fine to follow seniors, it's fine to be inspired by seniors, but again, that is not the only criteria to follow. It's okay, keep that in mind. Wherever your seniors have gone, you should definitely keep note of that. But don't just base your shortlist on that. And how about some web-based tools? Like there are forums, various forums that give you advice. And then there are, you just punch in a few numbers and you get the results. Again, to some extent, they may be right. But again, you need to understand the depth of an application evaluation process from the end of the reviewer also. So naturally, he or she doesn't know your senior. They don't know these tools. They don't know anything else. They just know you through your application. So there are so many nitty-gritties to be taken into account that just a web-based tool will not be able to give you so many insights. And then, of course, one of the most common criteria which is taken into account, ranking. So ranking is fine. I mean, you should to some extent consider ranking because it gives you an idea of how the college fares in a particular field. But again, ranking takes into account some consideration, some parameters which may not be of direct relevance to you. So, for example, ranking takes into account like how big the classrooms are, what is the teacher to student ratio, and other things like campus, how big the campus is, and other similar such things apart from academics. So naturally, these are not of direct relevance to you. You're not going there to measure the enormity of the campus. You are there to complete your course, and the course should interest you. So what is important? So basically, it's the idea of a lock and key. You should fit into the university like a key fits into a lock. So this is something that you should always keep in mind when you begin. And this is the beginning. Okay. So here the university would look for the best fit. And what is the best fit? Your profile with university requirements. Very important to understand this particular aspect, whether you fit in with what the university is requiring. And the second step is also very important, whether the university will do justice to your requirements. That is, the way the university has designed that particular course, whether it will meet your requirements or goals. And this they will understand from your documents. You will be given the chance to express your requirements, and those should be extremely clear, and they should be in alignment with what the university is offering. Now, when these two things are totally in alignment, then only it gives you the chance to get into that university. It's like the key then opens the lock. Okay, so basically, when let's come to it one thing at a time. So here you would see that I have highlighted. I had highlighted a few things. That is the student's profile. That is your profile, and then the university requirements and all that. So coming to it one by one, what is meant by your profile? Now, when you try to evaluate your profile, you try to look at yourself through the eyes of the universities. Okay. And when you do that, then you need to understand their method of evaluation. So for example, if we are targeting to go to US, then we should understand how the US universities evaluate you. Right. So US evaluation is more holistic in nature, in the sense they take into account various aspects of your profile, not just one or two things. Okay. That is what is meant by holistic approach. So here, when you turn in an application, all the components of your application more or less get weightage. I'm not saying they get equal weightage. That is a wrong idea. But they get weighted, some amount of weightage. So you are being evaluated in totality. Whereas, as opposed to that, if you are applying to Canada or to Europe, the stress is more on academics and research experience. So there they will check these factors first, and of course whether you meet the English language requirement, minimum English language. That is also there in US. So if you meet the minimum English language requirement, then they look at your academics, mainly your academic preparation, which includes your GPA and what all subjects you've taken, as well as the related research experience that you have. Okay. So now coming to the two types of evaluation one by one. So when I say holistic evaluation, what does that mean? So that means that it takes into account two kinds of factors. So when you have to cover so many aspects of a student's profile, you break it down into two factors, quantitative and qualitative. What does quantitative mean? Quantitative means your, let's say, your test scores. So GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, IELTS, these test scores. And needless to say, English language requirements, TOEFL or IELTS, that has to be met. Minimum requirements has to be met. Now, for the other scores, GRE or GMAT, usually universities don't set a minimum, but then they sometimes give a preference in terms of the average test scores that people get in with. But then again, this is holistic evaluation. So this is not just one factor that they consider. In addition to that, they consider your academic GPA, very important. So they look into the courses you've taken, your overall GPA, your scores in the key subjects related to the area where you're applying, and number of backlogs, etc. And in addition to that, any number of years of experience you've had in research or professional work, depending on the program. Now, in addition to that, there are other qualitative factors. Qualitative factors that add quality to your application. It's not measurable. These are, these adding to the quality of the application. So, for example, whether your preparation, both in terms of coursework and research and whatever, is it adequate for you to be able to catch up with the pressure in graduate school? So in graduate school, masters onwards, nobody is going to, make you sit and prepare. So there you have to do a lot of things independently. So are you well prepared for that in terms of academics and other? And then the research or work experience, one is the number of years that is there, number of months or years. And in addition to that, sometimes, the research experience may be of lesser number of months also. So, for example, some may have 3 to 4 months of research experience as opposed to 1 or 2 years from other candidates. But they are also going to look into the quality of research. So even within those 3 to 4 months, somebody might have done a very good quality research, very in-depth research, which is worth publishable. Whereas on the other hand, the other applicant who has 1 or 2 years of research work may have done just some very preliminary research, which may not result in an publication. So that is also considered. As for publications, you may or may not have a publication. That's not too important, but your research should be of publishable quality. So that is given more preference. And of course, recommendations. So you must have heard of letters of recommendation. We're going to discuss those later as well. So those are extremely important. What others are saying about you, and by others, I mean your seniors, in the sense people who have taught you, people who have supervised you. So someone in the supervisory capacity, what do they have to say about you? So that is also very important. And if we talk about like specificity of, so this is like the if evaluations. Now there are certain myths considered, which are, I see these to be very common nowadays. People asking me that, if I have really good letters of recommendation or great documentation, can that really replace my academic scores? So that's not possible, because a qualitative factor, which is a letter of recommendation, cannot really outweigh a quantitative factor. So everything, every aspect of the application is important. It's not like one can replace the other, but yes, one can outweigh the other. So if you've got bad grades, and if you really convincingly can explain that in your statement of purpose, and as well as highlight your other strengths adequately, then that definitely comes into the notice of the people who are evaluating you. So when you are applying to a university, you need to keep this in mind, that, what strengths do I have? Can my strengths really outweigh my weaknesses? If I'm applying to a place where they put a lot of stress on the overall profile. Okay. Now, coming to the next thing, which is, when there's specificity in evaluation. For example, as I said, Canada, Europe, they focus on academics. They do not encourage backlogs. They look into the research experience, and of course, they look into the the scores. Then there's UK, wherein English language requirements are very important. If you have very good English language scores, then they kind of see you very favorably. There's some like Australia. They prefer work experience quite a bit. Want scholarships and all. For Australia, you need to have research experience. You need to have publications. Okay. So these are some of the things that needs to be kept in mind when you're selecting universities, when you're selecting countries. So country is also an important thing, because now people select universities from various countries also. So you need to keep the evaluation style in mind when you are choosing a particular country and when you're choosing universities. You must have heard of University of California. And many people want to go there. starting from, Berkeley to Irvine and Merced, and there are so many others. But they give a lot of stress on academics. They consider everything else, but the stress is more on academics. They want to see good GPAs. On the other hand, there are some like Carnegie Mellon, which gives a lot of stress on GRE scores. So oftentimes people with more or less decent academic scores but very high GRE scores have gotten into Carnegie Mellon. Whereas if the reverse is true, that is people with very high academic scores but low GRE scores, they usually don't find an admit in Carnegie Mellon. And I say usually, it's not always the case, but this is the case in majority of cases. And then there's Harvard, places like Harvard and the Ivy Leagues, which give a lot of stress on recommendations. And especially if the recommendations comes from an alumni, or if it comes from a professor who knows someone in that particular department, if he gives a recommendation, that is always very, very useful. So these are some of the things that needs to be kept in mind when you're shortlisting, when you're looking for universities. So now coming back to your profile, whenever you're considering your profile, please do not make a comparison, because as you can understand, the various factors being considered by the various universities that you're applying to. So those are different, first of all, and also your profile is always different from another person. It's not like you can have an exact match. It is not possible. So that's why, always keep in mind that the evaluation factors, that wherever you're applying, what are their evaluation factors, what are they looking at, and whether it's a match with your profile, whether first of all you're meeting the prerequisites, you're meeting the minimum requirements. That is of course there, and even beyond, what do these universities look for? What have they looked for in the past? What do they look for? That is more important. You aligned with the university. You cannot look at other people and what they have gotten into, because every year it differs also, in the sense that every year the applicant pool also differs. So every year, some years may have very highly competitive applicant pools, while some years it may be it may be more relaxed. So that also matters. But you have to match your profile with the university's requirements or evaluation style.